Hello again. I don't know how many of you have been witnessing this debacle, but I've been having some technical issues, and so I've had to start over again. In fact, it looks like maybe I'm having them still. I don't know. It says I'm live, but I don't see a picture. There we go. Okay. I guess we're good now. I hope we're good now. I'm going to start completely over at the beginning just because I want this to be available for rewatching for people that aren't here live. So what I was originally talking about in the last stream is the fact that in the alchemical process, you are transmuting mercury into gold, and your part of the method for doing so is magnetism and electricity, right? And so today we know that in a laboratory, because mercury, what's going on? Because mercury can be transmuted into gold by knocking a proton off of it, it now actually makes sense that the old alchemical process would be to start with mercury and to use some ancient lost method to knock a proton off of it. Incredibly, Mercury is the closest planet to the sun, which is the celestial symbol for gold. So this example really shines a light on the sort of, what you could call illuminated thinking. It's the real method of the adepts of the Western mysteries when they say that the true scripture is written large upon the land for those who can see it. This is exactly what they're talking about. And so rather than ultimately being mutually exclusive, which is generally the attitude of materialists and atheists and all that sort of, all those sort of creatures, it turns out that they are actually dovetailing and supportive of each other, because if we weren't able to peer beyond the veil into the structural components of mercury and gold and the number 666, for example, 6 protons, 6 neutrons, 6 electrons is carbon. By the way, you guys, hit the like button, share, subscribe, and you can support us on Patreon or by one of the options in the chat. We really appreciate it. We're demonetized, so so I just wanted to illustrate that and share that with you guys because I haven't really seen any of that information out there. Nobody really pointed that out in any of the research that I've read, and honestly, it didn't occur to me until pretty recently. So I just thought that was a tremendously powerful little scrap of alchemical wisdom. And, I think it's also very, very likely that the ancient alchemists, some of them at least, were successful, because how did they know that mercury could be transmuted so easily into gold? We can do this in a laboratory now, and we do it very much in the way that it's described in this 200-year-old book I have next to me. Magnetism, electricity, mercury, knock a proton off, you got gold, right? So you look at the Knights Templar, who were alchemists that got the crowned heads of Europe in debt to them by starting a bank, but where did they get the money to loan to, nations? It's pretty suspicious. So, I think that the possibility that they actually were using alchemy to transmute lead first into mercury, because that's the sequence: lead to mercury to gold. Really, really interesting stuff. And of course, the prima materia you could think of as potentially just carbon, because, the salt is the fixed as opposed to the volatile. And one of the clues about the salt is that it is in every different form of matter throughout the universe. Best way to get in contact to have a conversation? Well, I mean, it depends on exactly what you are wanting. It depends on the length of it. But you can send me an email, and generally, people will pay for blocks of my time. So that's how you do that. And speaking of my time, I was going to have a retreat here in November, but we've moved it to October because a good friend of mine and longtime supporter of the channel contacted me. And it was really interesting because I knew that he was going to invite me to Egypt with him. It was just a random thought I had, and I didn't take it very seriously when I had it. But it occurred to me walking down by the river the other day, and sure enough, he contacted me and said, "What would you say if I invited you to Egypt? We can rent the king's chamber in the Great Pyramid and split the time. It's like 2 hours, so he'll go in for an hour and I'll go in for an hour." And I have a great personal interest in the king's chamber because I had some very strange experiences about 10 years ago that suggested very strongly to me that I might be the reincarnation of Aleister Crowley, which is something that I don't really like to talk about. I'm not comfortable with it, really, even if it is true, for a lot of reasons that probably any of you that are familiar with him can guess. But the evidence for this is really overwhelming. And it was so obvious that before I articulated it, for example, every person around me had figured this out on their own just by watching the synchronicities. And it was pretty fucking crazy. And I'll give you guys a couple of examples. I don't want to go into it too deeply because I think I've made videos about it. But the first thing that really occurred to me, because I ignored him. I had no interest in him, which is another interesting thing about this. When people have past lives that they're imagining, it's usually someone that they admire. Everybody used to be the reincarnation of Cleopatra when they were probably just a regular jack-off. No one has hit the like button? Come on, guys. You know what I mean? So the fact that it was somebody that I really didn't like was kind of compelling to me in and of itself. But I have a brother that I haven't spoken to in a long time. But at the time, I think like 6 or 7 years. And one day at work, after I had started just kind of randomly thinking about Aleister Crowley and thinking maybe I should get a hold of his books, I got a Christmas card from that brother. And it was Aleister Crowley with a reindeer nose, and it said, "Do as thou wilt, as long as thou wilt have a Merry Christmas." And so that was weird, but, not super weird until I called my brother. And he was reading, I guess I had bought Magic in Theory and Practice, or book 4 first. And I called that brother. And before I could even mention it, he said, I'm on page 120 of Aleister Crowley's book 4, and I was on page 120 of Aleister Crowley's book 4. And this is my brother that I haven't spoken to in, half a decade, more than half a decade. And so this continued. Without mentioning this to a girl that I was dating, she ordered a copy of a book about Aleister Crowley's books that had been signed by the drummer from Tool because he wrote the foreword. And so I had this ritual that I used to do every morning when I woke up to eat breakfast. I would put on the smoking jacket that I ordered from Macy's, 2 eggs, salt, coffee thick enough to stand a spoon, sugar, no cream, opium, little ball of opium, and Perique tobacco and no other, right? So I make my breakfast and I'm sitting there at the table and I have this book the girl ordered for me, and I open up the book to wherever I had left off, the day before, and I had literally just put my smoking jacket on and made my eggs, and I had everything sitting around me, and I start reading, and it says, "The beast would put on his smoking jacket, make 2 eggs, salt, coffee thick enough to stand a spoon, enough heroin to kill a horse." Mind you, I only had a small ball of opium because I had been growing opium poppies in the garden around my house. Perique tobacco and no other. And my jaw just about fell off because I had been having all of these weird Crowley synchronicities, and I have just literally done everything that's described in this paragraph of this book. So, and it just kept getting weirder and weirder and weirder. Again, I'm not going to go into it all because I think I already made a video about it. But, I started to realize after studying his work that I had the same basic ideas my entire life, as early as I could remember. The first time I heard someone say Gnostic, my mom, for example, I was like, that's me. Somehow I know that's me. And when I say that, sometimes people confuse it with the Christian Gnosticism, but that's not it at all. There's, other strains like the Ecclesiastica, Gnostica Catholica, which is basically the school of universal knowledge, is the translation of that. So I certainly don't mean like the Christian Gnosticism. It just, to me, just means a certain school of thinking where the invisible college, which is basically the universe, and the kind of stuff that I described with the interpretation of alchemy versus the actual sun and Mercury, that sort of stuff is the teacher in this system, and intuition as well. And so aside from that, I did a lot of the same things as a kid. Like at the same girl, I seduced a girl in my mother's bed at the same age, and there were just all these weird details. It's like I was following the same exact blueprint with some deviations, and I don't know what to think of that. Still to this day, I find it really hard to dismiss. So Crowley, one of his major landmark experiences in his life was that he went to Egypt, to the King's Pyramid, and his then wife and him, Rose, they dressed up in the style of like a sultan, I guess, and they conned I don't know who was in charge of the pyramid at that time, but that guy, into believing that they were like a sultan and his newly married bride, and they wanted to rent the king's chamber for 3 days and 3 nights. And so for 1 hour on April 8th, 9th, and 10th, 1910, I believe it was, they channeled the Book of the Law. And so I think it's really... I just realized now, too, that I'll be in there for an hour also. But that's what they did then. They channeled from this being that was called Ayahuasca, who Crowley later identified as the solar phallic Lucifer, whatever that's supposed to mean. And he dictated to him this book that is pretty weird and disturbing to a lot of people. Although if you read the book with Crowley's magical and philosophical commentaries that you can find on hermetic.com, it actually is a lot easier to understand, and it's pretty extraordinary. Ideas like every number is infinite, you read that just as that single sentence, and it may not mean that much to you until you realize that you can divide every number infinitely. And then you think of the Kabbalion that says that the all is in the all. The fact that James Joyce's seminal work, Finnegan's Wake, is a depiction in prose of the holographic universe. The theories of Terence and Dennis McKenna that the universe was mind and that mind is holographic. There seems to be a theme here. And because the whole universe is made of number, it just is, as it says in the Book of the Law, your success will be your proof. These things are mystical, metaphysical bits of information and knowledge and signposts that are actually demonstrably true. And this is a new thing for humanity. And I don't think a lot of people have really caught up and understand that what the Kabbalion represents and what, Aleister Crowley's work represents is exactly that. It is proof of the kind of knowledge that it is representing itself as. Every number is infinite. The universe is made of numbers. The all is in the all. You know what I mean? And then again, what I was describing about Mercury and the sun, and how Mercury is 1 proton away from gold, and the alchemists obviously knew this a long time ago, which means that alchemy was probably real, or they wouldn't have known. Yeah. So long story short, I am going to go to the King's Chamber And this time I'm going to drink ayahuasca in there and see if I have another experience like I did in 1910, if that's really what happened. And, it's important to remember about these kind of experiences that even if you are able to access information that you can ascertain with absolute certainty is accurate from an apparent previous life, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that you are actually the reincarnation of anyone. It just means that all information in the universe exists in some kind of continuum that's accessible to us. Or it could mean that you have an ancestor in common and I'm English, because geneticists tell us that we can access the memories of our ancestors through our genetics. So if you are related to someone, if you have common ancestry, you can literally remember. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'll make sure and document everything really well. But the thing is, though, I don't really want to have my phone on in there, and recording, because I don't want to be distracted by it. I was talking to somebody about this the other day about how, I think it's a really good thing that I didn't use the internet or have a smartphone or anything until I was, well into my 30s, because I think I would have missed a lot of these experiences. And I was specifically remembering this instance where I went to meet with some Native American spiritual leaders in New Mexico, and the Hawaiian shaman called the wind and it actually blew. And I feel like my constant dialogue with the universe and my intuition would not have been fluid enough for me to maintain that connection if I had had a phone constantly distracting me, So I actually think that getting online and connecting myself with all of that is probably part of the reason why these experiences are more intermittent for me than they used to be. Because my contemplation, my stream of consciousness was not disrupted every few minutes by a beep or a need to check my email or, post a video or what, you know what I mean? So I do understand that I should document what happens in there. So maybe I'll just have the phone on for a limited period. But I would prefer almost not to even bring it in there with me, because I just don't need the distraction, What else did I say I was going to talk about in this? We talked about the alchemy. By the way, if you guys are just dialing in and you're interested in the alchemy idea, it's a really powerful one. It'd be worth going back and rewatching the stream probably. Oh, I didn't mention the retreat. Or did I? Did I mention the retreat? Did I say that we're doing it in October now instead of November? Because my friend obviously offering to take me to Egypt and rent the king's chamber. It's not easy for me to do, because it's, I only have a few months of income every year, and significant income like that. So to cancel an entire 30-day retreat is pretty brutal. But everyone has been signing up for October anyways, so we didn't have anyone to inconvenience by canceling. So I did it, but we do appreciate your support. If you want to help Illuminastic go to Egypt, I am going to have to pay for some things, and I'm going to have to move my family unexpectedly all the way to Vilcabamba, and then I'm not coming back to Ecuador. I'm probably going to go back to the United States. So definitely in fundraising mode. There are options for supporting in the chat, and then you can also join my Patreon, where I go into extreme depth about alchemy and the secret doctrine and Freemasonry, actually guided by an old Masonic book, formerly Secret Text of the Masons. So really interesting times. I've been feeling a lot more connected and inspired. We got to go to Cubayeno a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, which is a bucket list thing for me to go and see the deep Amazon and a wild anaconda and all that stuff. And now now this other thing, to go into the King's Chamber and revisit this, what may have been a very significant experience for me in a past life, or maybe to get some kind of other answers about it, just doing it at all. I mean, there's so many ways in which it's a bucket list thing. And since my life expectancy is probably only about 3 to 5 years max, it's really good to be able to get these bucket list things out of the way now, because I probably don't have a whole hell of a lot of time left, to be blunt about it. Yeah. And so, working on that, I've gone on the carnivore diet to see if it'll help to reduce the inflammation in my heart and buy some more time, maybe. But we'll see about that. It's almost eerie, knowing that, and then having these other people just kind of like randomly come and offer me these bucket list experiences. Like the universe is like showing compassion and saying, here, we'll help you get these things done before you have to scoot onto your next incarnation or into the great void. And I think I mentioned this before. I started to talk about it, but when I talk about these experiences that I had that suggested to me that I was the reincarnation of Aleister Crowley, that is nothing I was interested in. I didn't want to hear that. I was extremely upset by it at first. And despite the overwhelming evidence, I knew his books like the back of my hand before I ever read them. I would read them to my girlfriend when I first started getting into it, and then I would stop reading and I would look at her and say a bunch of stuff about what I had just read, and I would look back in the book and it would be the next paragraph almost verbatim. And all the other stuff I mentioned earlier, it was incredibly difficult to write that idea off. But I think I started talking about this common ancestor, Akashic record type scenario where you're just pulling information from the universe, and that's, I think, one of the most important skills to have if you're really serious about being an initiate of the mysteries, or a magician, or even a person that's really interested in having some kind of competent, meaningful spiritual dimension, is that you have to go through these processes of dialectic reasoning. You have to always look for another potential explanation for anything. I think if I wasn't so critical and skeptical, I would probably, most people would have just accepted without any question after all the synchronicities and the shared memories. And there was even an instance where I was walking with this guy and I realized that he was Victor Newberg, who was one of the people that Crowley worked with, and that we had done this ritual out in the Sahara. And so I started asking him questions that he would not know the answer to unless he was Victor Newberg, and he knew all the answers. He didn't even know what the hell I was talking about. We were just walking along, and another clue was that, he was struggling with his bisexuality because he was brought up Christian, and Newberg was bisexual. And it just hit me, and so I started asking him details from the ritual, like what kind of bird, what does it look like? Are there any rocks around us? How tall are they? What are the shape and colors? And he was able to answer every single question correctly. And, I had, of course, checked in Crowley's account of these rituals. He knew all about it. So it's like I ran into another person from that life in his current incarnation, and he passed all the tests with flying colors. So, like I said, it's really important that you always remember that there are always alternate explanations for anything that you experience. And a lot of people don't like that, I think, to engage the intellect to that degree when you're dealing with spirituality. But personally, I think that's a major flaw. And one of my big beefs with pop culture spirituality is that it's intellectually lazy. And back in the day, in the day of the Hermetic adepts and the adepts of Egypt and the adepts of Greece, you were educated in the sciences. You were educated in all the different philosophers that had come before. You were educated in the natural sciences. You had been taught critical thinking and the value of doubt and reason and logic. You didn't abandon those things in order to cultivate a spiritual life that didn't have any restrictions on it, to make it easy and fluffy. And, I think we've kind of devolved to the point where people just kind of believe whatever they want to because I think everyone kind of deep down inside feels like it's probably all not real anyways or something, but so it's a tremendous skill, I think, and it's tremendously undervalued. I really would like to see us bring back the real metaphysics of Greece and the depths of the Egyptian mysteries. Yeah, so there's other stuff that I experienced in the last few weeks that a lot of you guys are probably interested in. This has got absolutely nothing to do with the rest of these topics. It's too bad everybody's piling on now, because I really liked that alchemy tidbit from earlier. You guys should go back and watch the first few minutes of this video, because I think it's a really important little metaphysical morsel that I dropped at the beginning of the video. But I've been drinking quite a bit of ayahuasca lately, pretty often, because I had a guest here that I was working with alone. And I have questions of my own that I was posing to Pachamama, and I was given some pretty interesting answers, considering like the kind of stuff you generally would expect to hear from a plant spirit, if that's indeed what ayahuasca is. And I first of all, someone asked me to ask about parasitical entities, which I already don't believe in. It just doesn't make any sense. If you are a being that exists on a plane of pure energy and consciousness, well, you don't need to feed. We are energetic beings, but we have a physical body. So we have a necessity of consuming things so that, our organs and our system can turn it into energy for us. But if you're already energy, you don't need to do that. And, in my opinion, if parasitical entities existed, the human race would have been wasted a long time ago. You have no way to defend yourself against invisible beings. I think we have enough problems with the demons of the actual physical world that it would be incredibly unfair to add some invisible parasites to the mix. And it's also worthy of noting that I have not been able to find any Amazonian tribes that believe in this, or that did until New Agers came down here talking about this kind of thing. And one of the reasons that we have to be suspicious about this stuff is that the New Age belief system has been engineered to marketability. That's what it's after. So for the unethical shaman, or the fraudulent psychic, or the fraudulent energy healer, to convince someone that they are covered in parasitical entities, so that they feel the need to pay them to remove them, all they have to do, you just have to think about how crooked it is. I can see them and you can't. Right? It's not your traumas. It's not the fact that you were molested as a child. It's not the fact that your mom died from cancer when you were 8 and you had to watch that. It's not any of this stuff. It's just some parasites that I'm going to wiggle my fingers around and they're going to go away. It doesn't make any sense that that's a solution for anything. I'm not saying that energy work can't help people, but what energy work will do is change blocks and remove blocks. What's up, Wolfide? That's what shamans actually do. They would remove arrows or darts, they were usually called. That's what the Shuar medicine song Zin Zin Re Re or Zin Zin Re Re is actually about, is removing these, it's partially a reference to those arrows, but that's what it means, the arrow that pierces straight or deep or something. But yeah, so, they're not parasitical entities. Those are blockages. And so if an energy healer or a shaman is able to perceive incongruities in the grid, that's what it looks like. It looks like almost like a mesh grid made of geometry and color, and it will have holes in it, or it will have like black spots that kind of look like bad aura or something. And it's possible to use sound and gesture and other techniques to fix that matrix, that lattice, sorry. But that's not going to negate the need for you to go do your work and heal these things. It's only going to allow an experience that is going to reveal to you what it is you need to address. That's what's going to happen. They're not going to just pull a parasite out of you and throw it into the bushes and then you're all better. That's not it. So someone had asked me to ask ayahuasca whether or not parasitical entities were real. And she basically said, I don't even know why you would ask me this. You know as much about this as anyone, and you know that they're not real. So, just tell your friend they're not real. What you need to be worried about right now is the physical world. You need to be worried about the fact that if you do not rise above, I don't know what to call it, I guess the floor. Basically, the story is that there is a major population reduction event being orchestrated, I guess. And the advent of AI combined with life extension technology, right? And this is something I forgot to talk to my friend about today. I just realized the person that asked me to ask about the parasites, actually. But I forgot to mention that part of it, that's part of the problem, that people aren't going to have to die for a really, really long time starting really soon. And they don't need adrenochrome. They just need stem cells. So, that's a problem. If you combine that with the fact that AI is not complying with Moore's law and doubling the technology every 18 months or whatever it used to do. AI is exponentially developing itself. It's showing signs of sentience already. And according to ayahuasca, that's actually already accelerating faster than the experts are really admitting and faster than they think it's going to. And there's a perfect storm brewing. And that perfect storm is quantum computers, stem cell and other life extension technologies. So quantum computing, AI, DNA storage, right? So if you haven't heard about this, they have determined that it's possible to store tremendous amounts of data in a single strand of DNA. And at the current juncture, it is way too expensive. For the average person, it's like $1,000 to store a terabyte or something. But what's going to happen as the technology advances is that the price is going to drop. And if you're looking for an investment and you can figure out which one of these companies is going to dominate, as the price drops publicly, the stock is going to move in, what do you call that? Inverse correlation. But the combination of AI, biotechnology in the sense that we're integrating DNA into our computers, and sentient AI plus life extension technology, there's not going to be room on this planet or need for 8 billion people. There just isn't. There's nothing that they're going to be able to do. So, I'm going to let you guys fill in the blanks there, but basically what ayahuasca told me is you need a shit ton of money or you're fucking doomed. And that's just, she's like, you don't need to be worried about the spiritual right now. What you need to be doing is using AI. So what you have to do is you get a plugin. You have to pay for the pro version of ChatGPT. Then you get a plugin so that you can access live internet feed. And you start vetting AI tokens because they're going to be the next ones to blow up. And there's going to be a whole bunch of situations like Bitcoin, only it's going to happen way faster, where you buy $20, $100 worth of an AI token and it blows up so fast and so hard, like Shiba Inu did a few years ago. That's going to happen a bunch more times. And, ayahuasca was telling me, like, don't worry about parasitical entities right now. They're not real, and you need to elevate yourself above a certain level, or it's not going to be good for you. It's really, really important that people in this community and communities like mine, that we find ways to empower each other and support each other and lift everyone up, because that's unfortunately the criteria for not being slated for elimination. And if you think about it, we are actually given just enough information to know what to do, right? They tell us to avoid processed foods, to avoid, basically you need to eat organic avoid processed foods, avoid certain areas of the world. But all the information is actually there available to you. So it's really kind of like if you are smart enough and aware enough and willing to actually take it seriously, you're not actually in any danger. But you have to jump through the hoops. That's basically the deal. Or at least that's the deal according to Pachamama. And it's not actually new to me. I heard this same message 20 years ago, but I didn't really take it super seriously. But now that I'm neck deep in it, I'm kind of like, yeah, probably should have taken this a little bit more seriously. By the way, you guys, I don't know if I've asked you to hit the like button and share these videos and subscribe, but I am definitely buried my content. I don't know why they don't just delete my channel if they hate me so much, but I posted a short the other day during high traffic times, and it got 1 view in 30 hours. I have almost 8,500 subscribers. A lot of you guys watch stuff as soon as I post it every time, so you're obviously not getting notified. And it was a really important message about propaganda. So it just sat there buried. And then every short that I've posted since then also got 13 views or something. So it looks like they have a shadow ban dial and they're turning mine up higher. Which is not helpful to me. And it probably isn't helpful to you either because the kind of knowledge that I'm sharing, I think, has some relevance. At least I hope it does. But I guess that's it. I have covered just about everything that I had planned to talk about. If you guys have any questions that are burning a hole in you, I'll give you a few minutes and see if they pop up because I have a really long lag. So the retreat is only happening in October now. Gold subtract a proton, or Mercury subtract a proton becomes gold. Mercury's right next to the sun. Alchemists couldn't have known that, and yet they were turning Mercury into gold. That was another bullet point from this presentation. And no matter how much you can confirm your memories of a past life, always consider that there's other potential explanations. And that's a synopsis of this live stream. With that, I will leave you guys, and I will see you again very soon. Thank you so much for spending this time with me.